From your perspective, why did President Trump decide to put pressure on Ukraine but not on Russia after the first first stages of negotiations between American and Russian delegation?
I think that's almost an impossible question to answer, because what is going on inside Donald Trump's head and the heads of those that are immediately around him, I don't know. That terrible meeting in the Oval Office between Donald Trump and President Zelensky, in which J.D. Vance attacked President Zelensky, I'm still trying to work it out. Traditionally, the US Vice President is not involved in international negotiations. That is the responsibility of the Secretary of State. Marcus Rubio is the new Secretary of State. He was sitting beside J.D. Vance in the Oval Office and didn't say or do anything. J.D. Vance's his attack, he's not a very experienced politician at these higher levels, and is not experienced in geopolitics. I think he is not very familiar with how the world is laid out and how it works. I have some theories, and one potential theory about why President Zelensky was attacked, and therefore why the Americans seem to be supporting Vladimir Putin, is that Trump is trying to pass the blame for there not being a peace deal, and pass that blame onto President Zelensky. And here's my logic. Donald Trump said that he would end the war within 24 hours of him being in office. That was never going to happen. His team then changed that to within his first 100 days of being in office. And he's now on about day 70, 75, coming up to day 80. So he's on a fast path to try and achieve something in that. He's spoken to President Zelensky. He knew what President Zelensky's peace plan was. So, he'd got some way forward there. He spoke to Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin did not agree with any of the terms that Trump was putting to him, did not agree to freezing the front lines and allowing a diplomatic settlement at some stage in the future, as per President Zelensky's plan. Effectively, Vladimir Putin has said to Trump they intend to continue fighting. Trump, trying to save face domestically, thought that there's no way he's going to achieve this peace plan. So rather than him take the blame for doing something that he was never going to achieve in his first 100 days, he's trying to pass that blame onto President Zelensky so that he can turn around to his supporters in the United States and say, hey, I tried. Everyone wanted peace, but President Zelensky didn't keep his side of the bargain, and therefore it's all his fault. So I think he's playing domestic politics, and the last time the US played domestic politics was whenever the Speaker of the House refused to allow the debate to go on a $60 billion aid package to Ukraine, and that cost thousands of Ukrainian lives. And Donald Trump is doing exactly the same, costing thousands of Ukrainian lives because he's focusing on domestic political issues, I think.
So you're confident that Vladimir Putin has rejected Trump's offer on freezing the front lines and to freeze this war?
Yeah, the commentary that I've heard out of Putin's office is that Putin wants more. He doesn't want the front lines out of there. He wants the whole of the Donbass. He wants to achieve his military objectives, but by forcing Donald Trump to try and get those given to him without him having to continue his fight. Because Vladimir Putin, I think, if he doesn't know, certainly those that are advising him should know that they're not going to be able to achieve their objectives through military means. The Russian military are being held back by the extremely brave and capable Ukrainian forces, and have been held back for 3 years now. Russia has been defeated in its overall strategic aims with its war in Ukraine. It failed to topple the Zelensky government. It failed to capture Kyiv, and it's been held in the east by the Ukrainian military, numerically a much smaller military force, and that's embarrassing Putin. He's now using every means he can to try and achieve an objective that he can then say to the Russian people that he has won the war. and walk away with that. But this is where very, very, very dangerous activities are going on at the minute from a wider geopolitical perspective, because if Vladimir Putin does walk away with any territory, and especially with more territory, that could stimulate other dictators around the world with territorial ambitions going for different parts of different countries or different islands. And I'm thinking of Xi Jinping in China here, carrying out military activity to take Taiwan. If he thinks he can get away with it, he'll do it. That would cause a massive economic shock across the globe, and would probably start or be the very beginning of a global conflict.
You just mentioned about Russia's willingness to capture to the whole of Ukraine. Russia is willing to discuss a ceasefire in Ukraine only if there is a progress toward a final peace settlement, according to Bloomberg publication. Does this mean that Vladimir Putin is ready to agree with a ceasefire deal only if his terms are being accepted by Donald Trump and President Zelensky?
I think so. Yes. You know, what Vladimir Putin would be quite happy to do is to freeze the front lines, with the objective of him getting the rest of the Donbass region as part of a settlement. But the other thing that I think Vladimir Putin wants is time to pause so that he can reconstitute his military, so that he can give his military a rest, so that he can get more equipment in, he can create more formations, he can get more ammunition. You know, he's relying on a large proportion of his ammunition for his artillery coming from North Korea. It shows that the Russian defense industrial base is just not up to continuing to support this war. And with the number of casualties that are coming through, the Russians cannot continue to support the numbers of troops that they need in the front line. And therefore, if Putin can get a pause, and that pause could go on for 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Putin will be thinking long term. He doesn't think in the rapid numbers of days that Trump is thinking in. Putin will quite happily try and find some way of reconstituting the Russian military again, and will come back and try and take more. That is just what the Russians do.
And do you expect Russia to agree, at least to this pause, to agree with ceasefire deal without any kind of without Ukraine making concessions to Russia?
No, I think Putin will insist that Ukraine makes concessions to Russia, and even freezing the front line and allowing Russia to keep the territory that it has illegally captured and annexed politically is something that is in international norms should be completely unacceptable. I cannot believe that we're seeing the Americans even contemplating that. I know President Zelensky recognizes that he cannot take that territory back militarily from a tactical level operation, but actually he can set the conditions to take it back with more of an operational level strategy, which is operating very, very successfully and being coordinated and controlled by General Budanov. And that includes the attacks on the Russian oil infrastructure, Russian air bases, the Russian railway system, on command and control headquarters, the assassination of Russian generals in Moscow, which puts psychological pressure. All of that is building up and causing Russia to move closer and closer to the point where it cannot continue to support the tactical conflict that it is fighting. Once you get into that position, then everything changes, and Ukraine could start to roll the Russians up. We're not far off that. And why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing, I just don't know.
We don't know too. And also it's interesting that President Zelensky is ready to accept a ceasefire deal only if proper security guarantees are being provided to Ukraine, but Russia doesn't want these security guarantees to be provided to Ukraine, because Russia has said it won't accept the presence of NATO troops in Ukraine, and also Russia has rejected a proposal by European countries to deploy peacekeeping force to Ukraine to enforce a ceasefire. Also, Russia has rejected a 1-month ceasefire proposal in the air and at the sea. From your perspective, do you see this as signs that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to stop his invasion? He would like to continue, because if there are European troops on the ground in Ukraine, he would not be able to do so.
Yeah, Putin will not want to stop the conflict until he gets some form of concessions, and the longer term concessions that he can then sell as something, as something that he has won, that he has achieved, and therefore he will continue to reject these things. But we're a long way off there being a peace plan and something for people to sign and something for people to work out how you're then going to police that peace plan. I think President Zelensky is completely right in insisting that there's some form of security guarantees. Russia will continue to say that they're not going to be part of any operation that European nations or sort of accept any operation where there are European nations there or NATO nations contributing to any peacekeeping or peace enforcement force. But then Putin forgets that only a few years ago, Russian troops were part of a NATO-commanded force, in Kosovo. And they drove from Bosnia to Kosovo to meet up and to be part of KFOR that was there, and we're quite happy to work under NATO command and control, albeit it was a coalition of the willing that was there as well. So I think we're just seeing manoeuvring from a geopolitical perspective at the moment, trying to see what piece of paper everyone can get onto and what they can put on that piece of paper before you start to join all the dots on that paper to bring people together for some form of peace plan. We're a long, long way off that happening.
But why are Western leaders so actively discussing this plan to deploy peacekeeping force to Ukraine if Russia will not accept this plan?
I think there's a number of different reasons. One, to sell to their own domestic audiences that there are going to have to be tax rises or difficult financial decisions to be made in home countries. The second thing is to send a wake-up call to various countries' defence industrial bases to allow those to start to expand and ramp up production. And again, that will cost each of the contributing nations more money, either in taxes or been taken from other government expenditure to do that. I think the next reason for it is to send a clear message to Vladimir Putin that there are countries that will stand up and are behind Ukraine and will go and help any peace deals, so Ukraine is not standing alone. And again, to send that message to Donald Trump, saying we recognize that the Americans might not contribute to this. We are countries who will contribute to it. So it's to court favor with Donald Trump when it comes to maintaining wider support elsewhere and other political deals that countries are trying to do with the United States. And then the only two countries that have said that they will contribute peacekeeping troops are the UK and France. And of course, it's the British Prime Minister and the French President who've both been to see Donald Trump. They were there a few days before that horrible incident in the Oval Office between J.D. Vance, Donald Trump and President Zelensky.
Also, there is a big idea being discussed in European capitals. European Air Force of approximately 120 fighter jets could defend Ukrainian skies on the west and on other parts of Ukraine as a part of a peace deal. How can you assess the possibility of this mission without a ceasefire deal signed by both sides?
Well, it'd be very difficult if there wasn't a ceasefire deal to put a no-fly zone in place, which effectively what it is. And for an air package of that sort of size, from a coalition of the willing, it still needs some form of command and control. The air power command and control capability that there is for European nations, for the countries that could supply that sort of air force, it's embedded in NATO. So NATO would have to get involved. It's the NATO AWACS aircraft that fly out of Germany. that can provide that airborne command and control, and are up observing what's going on almost on a daily basis around the borders with Russia. So again, it's something that is being used to send a political statement out without there being detail that's needed behind it to be able to put that sort of force package together. It's certainly something that could be done, and it's something that could be done relatively quickly. And I think that is, again, sending clear messages to Vladimir Putin so that Putin gets as worried as we can make him.
And also, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is trying to convince Donald Trump to provide a U.S. backstop for European troops if there is a ceasefire deal. It seems like, for me, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is really confident that this mission is possible. It's possible in the nearest future, and a ceasefire deal could be reached. What is your take on that? And another question, would it be possible for European allies to conduct such large-scale mission without U.S. backstop?
I'll answer your second one first. Yes, it would be possible. But it all depends on the size of the force that European nations would put in. It certainly wouldn't be a very heavy armored capability, but European nations are perfectly capable of providing sufficient troops in protected equipment on the ground and to sustain that for a period of time, because this would have to be sustained for 3, 5, possibly 10 years or more. And the US backstop. The US backstop's interesting because it hasn't been defined. Keir Starmer is sending this message out. He's playing what all politicians would do. He's playing it from a very positive perspective and trying to use the influence that he has with Donald Trump, that the UK has. That backstop is effectively a logistic backstop with US logistic air power, an air power backstop where US Air Force would not necessarily be directly involved, but if the European air forces got into trouble, then the backstop would be to call on the US forces in an emergency, and it's to get that. And the third one is an intelligence backstop to make sure that some of the capabilities that the Americans can bring in that are uniquely supplied by the Americans can continue to be supplied to a coalition of the willing. And that, I think, is something that the US would continue to do.
And my last and final question for you, what is your prediction on the next stages of negotiations between Ukraine, the United States and Russia, and what kind of tools Vladimir Putin could use against Trump if there would be a confrontation between Trump and Vladimir Putin, because it seems like there is a big risks for a confrontation between both leaders, as Putin rejects all peace offers from both sides, from Ukraine, from the United States.
Yeah, I think that, again, that's very difficult to answer. The language that's coming out of Trump, and I'm going to go back and add a little bit to one of my earlier answers where I was talking about the reasons for Donald Trump rounding on President Zelensky and not putting the same sort of pressure on Vladimir Putin. I think another reason behind it could be the fact that the last US President Biden, Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden, and his business connections into Ukraine, I think Trump probably blames President Zelensky for not providing the evidence that was needed to prosecute Hunter Biden and sees him as having too close a relationship with Joe Biden. But again, I'm speculating on that. So I think what are we going to see? What are the tools that are going to be in there? I think Donald Trump, is not going to reverse his pressure on President Zelensky. I don't understand why he's trying to insist that President Zelensky steps to one side and that elections are held inside Ukraine when constitutionally that can't happen, and physically it would be virtually impossible to run free and fair elections whenever you've got so many military in the front line, you've got so many civilians that are in Russian-controlled areas, and you've got so many Ukrainian nationals that are overseas who have managed to escape from the areas where the fighting was, so that they can protect their families. But why Donald Trump's insisting on that, I don't know. I'm hoping that we start to see Trump building up on pressure on Vladimir Putin and forcing Vladimir Putin to give some concessions. If he doesn't, that would say to me that Vladimir Putin has got some form of control over Donald Trump. And that control could be anything. And of course, we have to remember Donald Trump, as a businessman, has in the past done a lot of business into Russia. He has run Miss Universe contests in Moscow. And the Russians are past masters at finding ways of manipulating people whenever they get them in their claws. So Putin may have some method of manipulating Trump and manipulating the way Trump is thinking. There's a lot of very strange things going on that do not fit any of the norms that you'd think from global leaders, never mind powerful leaders of the United States. And I think Donald Trump is hurting the US economy and the US's position in the globe enormously, and I don't think he realizes it. And part of it is because his top team are very inexperienced from a geopolitical perspective, from a diplomatic perspective, from a high level of government perspective. And Trump seems to have this godlike complex that he believes he is right. He's trying to do too much at once. He's in what he's forcing with Ukraine is one thing, but if you look at the pressure then he's putting on in the Middle East, if you look at the statements he's putting out to China and elsewhere, if you look at what he's doing with international trade tariffs, if you look at what Elon Musk with Doge department is doing to all of the different government departments across the United States, he's causing chaos. No government could control the level of chaos that is going on with one of those areas, never mind all of them coming together. So I think we might see more random outbursts from the United States, more random thoughts coming out. Hopefully some of those will be aimed at Vladimir Putin in the future. The tools that are needed, I don't know. I think President Zelensky needs to just have a degree of resolve, and European nations need to make it very, very clear that we are behind President Zelensky and will give him as much support as possible as European nations ramp up their own military capabilities. I don't see an easy path to a peace plan anytime quickly.
Thank you, Colonel Ingram, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much indeed. Slava Ukraini.